Why smart people buy used iPhones. Yeah, you heard that right. Used iPhones under a couple of conditions. They have to be in good condition, of course, obviously. You don't want to get one with a bunch of scratches on it, all that stuff. But I want to explain to you 10 reasons why I think this is a great idea in 2020. Okay, so reason number one is that the software is the same version on all of them, and that not only that, but a smart person's going to buy a used iPhone because they get longevity even if they buy an older version of the phone. So yes, the iPhone 11 is the latest and greatest from Apple, but if you bought an iPhone 8 today, you're still on the latest software and you're gonna be on it for quite some time. Same with the iPhone XR. If this is just a little bit too high, the iPhone 11, get an iPhone XR, you're on the latest software once again. So the longevity factor that we know is key to iOS is an extremely good reason why it's a smart idea, and I think smart people buy a used iPhone. The software holds up. Reason two smart people buy iPhones used is because Apple likes to wait to change anyway. So what do I mean by that? Well, I mean that if you buy an iPhone XR, for example, used on the used market, I mean, look at the similarities to the iPhone 11. It takes them a while to change out to a newer design, and I will bet that the iPhone 12 that replaces the 11 is going to be somewhat similar to these phones as well. So they keep that same design philosophy for quite some time. Now, the iPhone 8 is a little bit different, but that was after like 4 times using the same design. We had iPhone 6, iPhone 6S, iPhone 7, and iPhone 8 all looking basically the same. So I would expect this trend to continue with the iPhone XR, iPhone 11, iPhone 12. We'll see, but I think that's what's going to happen. So, if you buy a used iPhone, essentially what I'm saying here is that your design is probably not going to look too outdated. So reason number three, smart people buy used iPhones is because the value drops even slower. So the person who's going to take the biggest hit on the iPhone is the person who buys it new. Now, I'm not saying it's a bad idea to buy it new. You get a fresh battery cycle and stuff like that. But at the same time, you're going to take the biggest hit on loss on your investment. I mean, these are not great investments to begin with, but for example, you buy an iPhone 11 at $700. Yes, it's going to hold on better than an Android phone. You're going to get $500 back, but somebody who buys a used iPhone XR at say $500, they're probably only going to drop $100 in their value, or maybe 150, because it slows down as the years go on. Then it starts to slowly lose its value. Whereas with the new iPhone, you lose a lot of value like in the first year. So buying a used iPhone is a smart idea just because the value doesn't drop as quick as one that's new. Okay, so the next one is you can get the exact iPhone you want used. Now, the iPhone 8, when Apple does decide to get rid of it, is going to be a phone that I think is still going to be a good value. Same goes for the iPhone 8 Plus, but it's not going to be available no more officially from Apple. But what's an advantage of buying a used iPhone, and why I think smart people buy used iPhones, is they can find their own, specific iPhone that they're looking for in their specific color. Sometimes they get rid of a phone in their lineup that you wanted that exact color for. So that could be a good reason to buy a used iPhone. Reason number 5 is a great way to try something new for less money. So if you're the type of person who's like, you know what, I want to try iOS, well, smart people are going to buy a used iPhone to try it out first, because you buy a used one, it's a less risky investment in terms of purchasing a new iPhone at a higher cost, and you get to try out iOS. I think an iPhone 8 is a great way to try out iOS, or go with something like a XR if you could find that around the same price point as like an 8 or an 8 Plus. XR can be a great way to try iOS as well. If you haven't tried it before, you just want to get your feet wet inside of the iOS ecosystem. So smart people buy used iPhones because it's a great way to try iOS for a cheaper price. So oftentimes at number 6, the iPhone will be ahead of competitors, even though it's last year's model. So yeah, you can buy a used iPhone 11 right now for cheaper, and you're going to get a better camera performance and a better video performance than a lot of its competitors in 2020. So the iPhone 11 is a great used purchase, and smart people are going to consider this because they're thinking like, okay, I can get a used iPhone 11 for cheaper than some of these newer competitors out here, and I'm going to get an amazing camera and video performance that's on par with Apple's best iPhone 11 Pro Max. So that's reason number 6 right there, why people would buy the iPhone 11 or something like that, last year's model at a cheaper cost used. So the seventh reason is that the software differences will be minor. So even from the iPhone 8 over to the 10R and the 11, the software differences are pretty minor besides just a navigation difference with the iPhone 8. So I said earlier that you're gonna stay up to date and things like that, longevity. But for number 7, we're talking about how just similar the usage of the software will be. So, you can buy a used one for cheaper and you're gonna get access to the same exact applications, basically the same exact experience. So it kind of makes sense to just get an older, cheaper model like 10R instead of 11, for example, at a better price point, because you're gonna run the same stuff and it's still gonna get the daily tasks done pretty easily. And at number 8 is that you don't have to get stuck in a contract or any kind of payment plans or promotions when you go with a used iPhone versus a new one. Now, it's easy to get trapped into those monthly payments, stuff like that. Now, the downside to this is sometimes you have to fork over more money up front. But at the same time, when you go with something like a used iPhone 8 Plus, you can pop basically any SIM card in there as long as you got the correct model for whatever SIM card you're gonna put in that phone. So I think this is a great reason to buy a used iPhone. I think smart people do this because it allows them more freedom and flexibility to move around different carriers and stuff like that. The next reason people buy used iPhones, smart people do anyway, is that you can get features on used iPhones cheaper that you would think you have to pay more for. So for example, the iPhone 8 Plus here. So you want to get a telephoto camera, but you don't want to pay $800, $900 to do so. Well, buy an iPhone 8 Plus used and you get yourself a telephoto camera. How about an iPhone 11, for example? You want yourself a wide angle camera on here. Well, instead of going and buying a new iPhone 11, save yourself some money and get yourself a used iPhone 11 and get that beautiful wide angle. How about the iPhone 10R? You want to get a great deal on a more modern looking iPhone closer to the current lineup of iPhones, but you don't want to pay much for it. You want the gestures, you want Face ID, stuff like that. Get yourself a used 10R. You're probably going to be quite happy with this device. So that's another great reason that smart people are going to buy a used iPhone, is that they need certain features that might be out of their price range, so they're just going to go with a yesteryear model to do so. And the final reason to consider getting a used iPhone over a new one, and why smart people will do this, is because overall, in the long term, the cost is actually less than buying new iPhones. So it's some basic math. If you buy a new iPhone at $1,000, let's say, you buy 2 of those and you keep them for 10 years. Well, you just spent $2,000. Now, if you want to buy a couple used iPhones, let's say you buy 2 at $400, you got $800 right there. Now, that's still $1,200 less than a new iPhone. You could still buy one new iPhone for, let's say, $700, and boom, you're at $1,500. So essentially, you can get a couple used iPhones and one new one in the span of 10 years for cheaper than buying 2 new premium iPhones. So, used over time in the long haul is going to save you hands down. The only downside to buying used is that your longevity is shortened by maybe 1 year of software updates, or 2, depending on how far back in the phone you do go. So that is why smart people buy used iPhones. That's many reasons why, and I think there's even more reasons why, but I want to hear from you. I know some of you out there have bought used iPhones before, myself included. Share a couple of places you bought them from and share a couple of reasons why, and why you think this is a great and smart idea to buy a used iPhone. And if you disagree and you think buying a new iPhone is a better deal, or maybe doing a trade-in and getting a new iPhone for almost a used price is a better deal, let us know what you think is the best way to get an iPhone down below. Thumbs up if you enjoyed the content. Subscribe if you haven't already. Nick here, helping you to master your technology. Be sure to be well. Thank you very much for watching, and peace.